From the twisted realm of science and the darkest pits of reason comes chilling tales of godlessness. Bear witness to the unfathomable terror that is the Good Atheist.
All right, welcome to the GoodAtheist.net podcast, episode 5, I believe.
Actually, I think 5 was the last one.
No.
You sure?
Actually, no, you're right. It was episode 5, last one. Yeah.
Yeah. Score 1 for me, 0 for you.
I don't even pay attention to my own podcast. Welcome.
And you are?
My name is Jacob Forte.
And I'm Ryan Harkness.
All right, let's jump right into this. I'm ready. I'm feeling pumped. I'd like to talk about something that has recently occurred and go into the bit of the story about it. I mentioned this to you before, that I was engaged in a correspondence with a particular individual on, MySpace. You are familiar, of course, with MySpace?
Yes.
It's
where all the underage girls go to get dates.
Yeah, underage, like 8 years old.
Pretty much.
So, regardless of its pedophilial leanings, I received an email from a particular individual. His name is Tony. And Tony is a Christian. And Tony wanted to know, he was just curious. I mean, he had, for no real malicious intent, but he wanted to ask me, he's like, I'm curious to find out, why are you an atheist? When did you decide that you weren't going to believe in God? So I decided that I was going to write back and just basically tell him that I've never really believed in God. And, then I basically explained that it's just actually a decision that I've never really had to make. I've never actually possessed that feeling that there was anything out there. I don't know. Personally, did you ever have to go through a similar kind of thing? Or?
Well, basically, when I was a kid, it was just the assumption that God existed. I didn't really think about it. But basically, as soon as I thought about it, it's up there on the same level as the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and all of those. Basically, as soon as I figured those ones out, I kind of figured out the whole God thing as well. I personally kind of lumped them all together, and it might have been because my mom was kind of... My mom and my dad were relatively non-religious, or at least they were. My mom has gone back to the flock now, but back in the day, she was pretty much... She felt it was a waste of time, so she didn't really support that whole movement. So I guess that probably made it easier for me.
Well, it's funny because there are two periods of time in which people become more religious or less religious. Typically those times are during preteen or early adulthood, and later on in life during
So you're
golden
saying
age.
that people can fall in or fall out
Exactly.
easier? Okay.
They fall in or fall out typically during these two periods in their lives. And the reason is either because they're going through some kind of like troubling or very disturbing events that often happen during those times, or sometimes, at least for the adulthood and preteen, they're going through changes in essentially their life as, it'll basically be structured, gets formed within that time. So their view and outlook on life essentially mimics that. It is formed around the same time. So this is typically the time where people make kind of like that decision, should I not believe? And then typically, like anything else, once you go for a product, let's pretend... to compare religion with a product, let's just pretend for just a moment that you decide that there's a particular kind of brand that you enjoy drinking in terms of soft drink. You're typically going to stick with that brand, right?
I can't say that for myself because I've always been very conscious of brands and I've always been kind of anti-brand. So I'm gonna blow. You can't use me for this example.
Right. Well,
just
even.
But I understand your point.
Okay. Well, even being anti-brand is actually kind of still a position, a corporate position. It's just you really commit yourself to it.
I did make a conscious decision to just not care.
Right, but it still had to be a conscious decision.
And probably over the course of the years, the mathematical calculations in my head of rotating through Pepsi, Coke, and RC Cola and store brand and everything.
Cola.
It is the king of colas.
I believe it is a title that it is awarded itself, but we'll forgive RC Cola for that, since it's struggling in a very, very saturated market. Okay, so basically Tony wanted to find out. So I answered him, and I guess through it there was a bit of a correspondence that developed. So he writes back and he says, well, personally, I find that it is just as much faith to believe in evolution as it is to believe in the Bible, which
is partially true for most people. It's true for me.
It really depends, because here's the thing. I mean, you're not really that familiar with evolution, correct?
I'm just not that smart.
Okay. Well,
I don't care enough. I rely on other people I rely on what other people say to back up the claims of evolution.
Okay, but at the same time, there's for you perhaps a kind of I wouldn't maybe describe it as belief, because if I came over and I presented you an argument that invalidated evolution, how would you react to that? How would you react to this faith-shaking event?
Well, what was it? What was that show? We were talking about this a couple of episodes back, because we always talk about, say, evolution.
It comes back to that. What can I say?
Well, about that show, and the Christians were putting up a pretty good argument. I believe I grilled you on a couple of these questions, like what about they're saying that the missing link was never... I mean, for all of the hackneyisms, definitely their questions were questions that basically I took their questions and I said, well, what's the story? And, I'm not going to blindly... I guess that's the difference, is that it isn't faith, because if there's basically something for me to ask that basically is the invalidator, the validator, I'll ask it. So I guess I'm not really going on faith, because I'm always looking for more knowledge when it comes up.
Well, you're willing to keep an open mind about it, and that's perfectly fine. Most people that believe in evolution, for instance, they don't believe in it in the same mechanism of people that have faith in a God. Because, I mean, if I provide you examples of evolution, if I say, well, let's look at corn, for instance, and we see many of its wild cousins that still exist.
I love Corn, great band, and all of its cousins,
I'm not talking
Mudvayne, Slipknot, System of a Down.
I'm gonna have to find another retard to talk to. No, you moron. Maize, as the Native Americans would call it.
I haven't heard them. Do they have a new album?
I'm sure they're a band somewhere. Anyways, if we look at corn, we can see that it has wild ancestors. They still exist today. They're a very practically inedible plant, but through about 10,000 years, I mean, the plant has essentially been bred specifically for us to eat it, and in doing so, it's become like a staple crop, but that's taken a long time, and it uses the processes of evolution, not through natural selection, which is how it works in the wild, but through artificial selection, which is our selection. Mm-hmm. Same way that a dog, like there can be a mini pincher and just a regular pincher.
Yeah.
I mean, there are only a very few select genes that actually control something as, at least for us, as critical as size.
Yeah.
But this is all things that we can breed for, and this is an example, for instance, if I was to quote how evolution works. Of course, when dealing with issues of faith, it doesn't really throw up any evidence. In fact, belief in God most of the time relies on the absolute absence of evidence. And that is the redeeming quality, apparently, of faith, is that you can choose to continue to believe despite the fact that everything around you tells you that it is not true. And that's what they pride themselves on, being like, look at me, I can still believe even though you've completely and utterly trashed my arguments, and yet I still choose to believe I am worthy of the kingdom of heaven.
And this seems like basically where, I mean, I definitely, I'm happy to hear you conversing with people, and I remember, because you were saying when we first had this discussion about Tony, was you were kind of saying, like, I don't know where he seems like he's kind of on the fence, and you kind of felt like you could reach out and maybe get to him.
Right. Well, I was thinking that perhaps the reason he was asking me is that maybe he himself, viewed himself as a Christian and stuff like that, but perhaps he had his doubts. I mean, like I said, people, of a young age, when, do tend to kind of go through these existential crises. So I thought, well, let me counsel this guy and explain to him exactly why I am, and maybe through this story I can help him. What I, of course, didn't realize is that he wanted to engage in a real conversation, whether or not that was to, say, potentially convert me, considering the fact that his entire group of friends consists of people that are already very, very fervent believers.
This is where you always have faith in that people are more open-minded they are, and I'm the more cynical person who, as soon as you told me about this, I looked at his website, I looked at his homepage, went through his pictures, went through his friends list, and I'm like, this guy is
hardcore into it?
Not hardcore, because, I mean, when you're looking at, the hierarchy of hardcore Christians...
Okay, but he's not fundamentalist. He's not a fundy.
No, I'm not even going to say he's hardcore. On the list of, 1 to 10, I'd say he's only a 4. But that's not to say that a 4 isn't very set in his ways.
Well, we're not accustomed to really being around individuals that are anything higher than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
At least not around here, not around like the people that we know, and
we don't know people. I mean, this is the funny thing, because we don't know most people who would run a website devoted to their religious ideals. But I guess that's you. So you'd be.
I'm an 8, or what do you think I am?
Oh, you're not an 8. I'd say someone like Dawkins, and who's that big jerk? Hitchens.
Christopher Hitchens.
Hitchens is like an 8.
Who's a 10? Who's a 10?
Who's a 10? Probably the guy who assassinates people that we don't know about. I don't know who.
The crazy atheist. Maybe one day.
Maybe you'll register that next.
Maybe
I'll crazyatheist.com.
Well, it depends on where this whole thing goes, I guess.
I guess if it goes all downhill, you'll pick that one up.
There you go. No, but I mean, it's not to say that, again, atheism isn't a religion, but it is a worldview that could be qualified as religious, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm the more hardcore version of him on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm. I'd say you guys are probably you're not quite relative equals. I think you're a little bit more hardcore in your stance than he is in his. But he seems relatively hardcore. So you guys, I'd say, would be equals. You guys are. Let's just say you guys are peers. You didn't realize this though at first, and I think if you knew. If you'd taken a little bit more of a look into what he was all into, would you have spent so much time responding?
It's funny because there's a particular, even knowing that, I'm still going to respond, because as I'm trying to still understand and dissect the way that belief works. I mean, I won't lie to you. The entire reason for me to do this is because I want to remove this particular element that people call faith from their lives. I want to eliminate it. I want to create in individuals thinking, rational, skeptical, people. Mm-hmm. And to do that, this particular element, the element that believes in superstition, that believes in faith, that believes in God, this element has to be expunged. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean in a violent way. I believe that this is a process of our own growth. I believe that we grow as human beings when we do this.
So it's all like the discussion and the debate and the talk is all leading up to getting yourself into a better position to be able to explain these points quickly and easily. This is kind of like a practice session.
It's a constant practice session, because you know what? As I talk to him and I see what he basically falls back to, because we'll take his latest letter back to me. And
do you want to start from the beginning, from some of his certain points, that the general back and forth? I'll step back and let you go through the.
Okay, I'll go back to the second back and forth. Is again, I was saying that he viewed evolution as faith. That was one of the major things.
Yeah.
He also said that although he didn't necessarily believe in religion per se, he did believe that the Bible was the Word of God. He did believe that Jesus Christ was apparently 100% man, 100% God. And all the classic elements of faith, baptism, that Jesus Christ is coming soon. That's the whole rapture thing. So he believes in these things, and he claims he wanted me to write a book that explained essentially or proved the existence of Jesus. Whether or not even that book, which I haven't read yet, and I probably will. Whether or not the proof of the existence of a man named Jesus means absolutely anything to me is, of course, still up in the air. I haven't decided. But these were essentially his points. So I sent him back my answer, which was saying, well, listen, the reason you might think that is because you probably don't know much about evolution. And you're right to say that some people do believe in a certain type of faith. They just take people's word for it.
I definitely give him points for saying that, yeah.
Okay. Well, and then that is a common argument among religious people. And then my argument was saying, well, listen, the evidence for evolution exists for you to find out. And this is essentially the big difference between, say, any religious proposition and scientific ones, because the scientific ones are there for you to check the facts. And you can really, I don't suggest you check the facts for 5 minutes. I don't suggest you go to Wikipedia, read the thing on evolution, and all of a sudden say, I've done enough here. It really seriously considers, takes a serious amount of commitment to really study this stuff. And I read this stuff all the time, and even I am not an expert in it. I'm still a beginner because there's so much to know.
Yeah.
But the reason that I'm so curious about it was that, this is something that I have to defend, because this is the first line of attack of anyone that's religious. Because for them, they understand the danger that evolution poses to their belief system. Because without the Creator God, without that specific event, their proof of his existence begins to evaporate into nothingness. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were to accept the treatise of evolution, the fact that we are just an offshoot of an obscured species that basically had no more chance than any others, and in fact I would argue even less chance than some, to survive, that we've only been on this earth for a fraction of its existence, kind of poses a very interesting question of why was God wasting so much of his damn time? Mm-hmm. And what is the significance of this species that has lived only a small amount of time compared to, say, certain types of bacteria, which have been around for 100 millions of years, crocodiles, which are hundreds of millions of years old, and their lineage can be traced back to that. I mean, I would say the crocodile is probably a more impressive creature. So is the shark. They've been around for a long time. They're a prehistoric animal that still exists today. Yeah. We're not prehistoric animals. We're offshoots of very, very, very recent animals, as much as maybe maximum 7 million years. That's a relatively pathetic time frame when you look at the age of the Earth. So they recognize that as a very potential and real danger. So that is their first target. And I studied this. And my argument was saying, listen, the evidence is available for you to study. And what he came, and another thing actually that I mentioned too is I said, look, if you really believe the Bible, you have to accept every word of it as the Word of God, and there are many parts of the Bibles that are repugnant. And I told him, just from Deuteronomy itself, that if you, or if your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your friend, if any of these people try to divert you away from God, that means if they tell you about yoga or about Zen Buddhism, it is your duty to stone them to death. You must cast the first stone in putting them to death for them trying to turn you away from Yahweh, your God. I mean, this is a literal quote. There are many other quotes, such as the fact that you should stone people for working on the Sabbath, that you are allowed to stone disobedient children. I mean,
Deuteronomy is definitely the
chapter they'd like to forget about.
Yeah.
So is the Book of Numbers, but there's actually an interesting side thing. I won't go into this right now about when you look at the authorship of the Bible and you see the kind of different types of writings and their different structure along with the different books, but we'll talk about that another day. So he writes back, and I guess he wasn't necessarily convinced from my arguments about evolution. I provided a lot of examples, but he wasn't convinced about them, presumably because he doesn't understand them. He hasn't had the research. How could he? I was talking Greek or Latin to him. But the other thing that he said, he's like, well, I do believe that every single word of the Bible is the Word of God. And he challenged me, actually, to find elements or parts of the Bible that are repugnant to modern-day morality. Mm-hmm.
Which are contradictory as well, right?
I have a list of about 100 things that are contradictory in the Bible.
That going up on the website?
If people want to go, they can go, and I can post it up if I get enough requests.
I definitely think you should, because, I mean, you can say all well and good. Yeah, I got examples.
Okay, fine. You know what? And here's the thing. For most of you podcasters, you may not have visited the site. I strongly recommend it, www.thegoodatheist.net. And I promise I will post that up so that you can look at just a number of... I won't put all of them because it's so lengthy that it would literally take up 10 pages.
Just point out the kind of big glaring ones.
I'll pick up the biggest one. I'll say the top 10 glaring inconsistencies. I mean, even though there are hundreds.
That definitely sounds like one that's going to be picked up on the Shoutcast, on the Shoutwire.
That, like the other one we're going to talk about shortly. But this is an example, for instance, of a man who more than likely has not actually read the Bible. He believes in the Bible the way that it's fed to him, as essentially a guide to moral living. And he told me, he says, as an atheist, how can you believe in morality and good and evil? You have no basis of morality. Now, okay, you're an atheist. You have morality. Where does it come from if it doesn't come from a book?
My mom.
For you personally. Your mom? Your
My
mom taught you morality?
Yeah, she taught it with a fly swat. She used to spanked the morality into me.
So you believe that someone can be punished into being good?
No, I was bad the whole time.
But okay, well,
but I got an understanding for what was bad that way.
All right, so you were trained.
Exactly. I'd say no. Well, on a realistic level, I'd say it's hard to say where morality comes from, but it's I don't see why it should be coming from any kind of divine area.
Well,
It's
I mean,
no
there's
Any other kind of
attribute?
Root concepts that we pick up.
No, that's the whole thing. I mean, like, if you look at human morality, I mean, there are certain corollaries, regardless of where you are, regardless of what they believe in. I mean, Stone Age people that have never heard of, Jesus, or even cultures that predated by thousands of years, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, I mean, they never heard of these individuals, and yet, despite that, engage in the same kind of behavior that we did. Altruism, kindness, love, empathy, passion.
Well, let's look at it like this. You've got different cultures all around the world that have different levels, or not different levels of morality, but different kinds of morality. I mean, you go back in the ages, and back in the day, it was perfectly moral for different classes to do all sorts of terrible things to other classes. So you look at the idea that morals aren't some kind of divine thing that God gave, because it's not like 500 or 1,000 years ago, God had no problem with people, with lords killing peasants or raping or their wives. That was just the moral standard of the time that was societally accepted. So when you're talking about morals, you look at it as a societal thing that gets taught through society, and that's basically, to me, where it comes from. And I think that's pretty obvious based over the ages of how morality has changed.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's a really fascinating book I encourage a lot of people to read. It's by Michael Shermer. It's called The Science of Good and Evil. And in it, he really kind of explains, there's an idea that basically morality is either nature or nurture. Nurture being essentially the society decides what good is.
Yeah.
Nature being, that there are certain traits that are human that are just innate. And his argument is essentially, that is a combination of both. Like, you may have your self-inherent talents for something. Pretend that you have an inherent talent, and we'll rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 of 6 or 7 in terms of altruism, the ability to be kind to other people, right?
Yeah.
Well, that potential exists, but what society you live in that can exploit and encourage those, and perhaps even extend it beyond that level, I mean, that'll determine what kind of individual you are. So it is really a combination. Without those properties being present, it would be impossible for you to have it. Mm-hmm. It'd be like trying to teach a child who's really developing, say a 2-year-old, trying to teach him to understand empathy.
Yeah.
Lots of young children don't possess those abilities because their brains aren't developed enough for it. Now imagine there was a particular emotion that you were unable to feel. It wouldn't matter how much it would be drilled into you. You'd never be able to feel it. You'd never be able to do it.
And that's where the fly swatter comes into the equation.
That the fly swatter becomes the kind of way of monitoring and harnessing those particular abilities that you already possess that need to be encouraged a little. And that's why in societies there are sometimes disparities. You'd be like, this society seems more brutal, this society seems more altruistic or good. And really it depends on the level of sophistication of that society to exploit the better parts of our nature while discouraging the more negative parts. Mm-hmm. And really, if we were to take the Bible as an example of whether or not this is a volume that's able to do that, and we had to take it in its context, and we read the entire thing, it is my belief that in general we would find that it is actually really kind of unable to do that. It's not a good guide. It's not a good guide because it is even inconsistent in its advice. People don't understand that the 10 Commandments that were given were for Jews only. But is that what the Jews say? The Jews are so, this is mine. Go away, this is mine. You can't be a Jew. No. Your skin isn't cut the right way on your penis.
Ah.
But no, here's the thing. Basically, why they didn't make slavery illegal in the States for a long time was because the Bible it said that slavery was okay. Any person that was not any individual that was not part of the Jewish tribe could be bought and sold as much as they wanted to. Even their own daughters, actually. Women were up for slavery. There was even specific examples of how long Jews could be slaves, could be enslaved for. I think it was a period of about 7 years. Anyways, it never condemns slavery. In fact, it condones it. Mm-hmm. So here you have a volume that not only condones slavery, condones genocide when Joshua massacres the Hittites and the Canaanites for no other reason than God telling him that he can do it, and he can take their land, and he can take for every woman that is not laid with a man as their own, and kill every woman, child, and man.
What book was that?
Good question. I believe it is the book of Numbers. Where's it? Leviticus. I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, not a very cheerful passage. But nevertheless, I mean, and a people is going to write a book for them. It's not going to write a book for everybody. It's not going to say, let them who are not Jews enjoy the fruits of our labor.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interested in that. They're interested in social cohesion, in group cohesiveness.
To give credit to the Christians, though, the New Testament is pretty everybody, let's get along now, sing along with your brother.
Come on, people now. Yeah, and that's actually part and parcel of one of the big reasons why Christianity has, say, in total, 1 billion plus, and why Jews still number about 12 million.
Yeah.
Christianity is one of those things that, regardless of who you are or where you're from, you need to be saved. Mm-hmm. That was a new thing that was really instituted long after Jesus' death by Saul of Tarsus, who wrote about him.
Yeah.
Basically, God commanded him that he needed to bring, religion to the what do they call it, the Semites or whatever.
Yeah.
So he did, and it was really popular. I mean, like the whole message of redemption of sin. I mean, people feel guilty already all the time. I mean, I can make you feel guilty for anything. I made you feel guilty for months for breaking my stove? I mean, it's easy.
Yeah. And you made me feel guilty about your birthday party again tonight. That was what, 9 months ago?
Something like that. It was a long time ago. But guilt is one of those feelings that, and every mother knows this, that is inexhaustible source of, of energy for you. You can get anything you want. Just make your kids feel guilty. Bam. Be like, how could you do this to me?
It's true.
It's good. It's a good tool. So I mean, obviously religion adopted it. But back to finish up with Tony before we go on to the next point. I mean, my big question to him is going to be this: what would it take for you not to believe? Is there anything that I could ever say that would lead you to say, maybe there is no God. Maybe this is all something that I've just conjured up in my own brain?
Now, what if he was the one that was going to ask you?
I actually have three examples where I would be willing to entertain that idea. Would you like to hear these 3 examples?
No. Yes.
Let me rephrase. Do you think that our listeners would like to hear the 3 examples?
Yes.
All right, the 3 examples are as follows. Number 1. If a prophet, say a modern-day prophet, or even an ancient prophet, was able to make a prediction that was completely and utterly accurate, or able to solve a particular problem that we are not yet able to solve. Let's pretend that somebody, like some prophet, said that I met with the Archangel Michael, and Archangel Michael has explained to me the unified theory of the universe between quantum mechanics and gravity.
Yeah,
I would be inclined to be like, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, if it is beyond our particular knowledge, because anecdotes are easy. Being like, you will be kind to your friend. Be like, yeah, some homeless guy could have told me that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
some really insightful thing that we don't know about yet, or just a prediction of what will the prime minister of our nation eat for breakfast in 2010 on February 12th.
So you're saying like specific, like it has to be something really specific and pretty much not guessable.
It has to be a true prophecy that is not really vague. It has to be specific, date, times, things that will happen. Then I would be like inclined to be like,
it can't be one prophecy mixed in with like 800 unsuccessful ones.
It can't, because you can make, if you're allowed to make 800, you're going to get one right.
Because I was reading about the Branch Davidians, and that was the whole issue with them. And it wasn't up when Koresh was around, because Koresh was smart and he didn't
make accurate predictions.
No, he didn't try, and everything he left really fuzzy. But like back in the day, the Branch Davidians, like they had all these people who would make prediction after prediction after prediction, and if they got 1% right, and
they'd focus on that.
Exactly, yeah.
It's called the file drawer effect. We're guilty of that all the time. It's like, remember I told you last one of the episodes where you kept looking at the clock and it was a particular time? That's because you would register every single time you did. But I mean, it's just like trying to close your eyes and throwing darts at a dartboard. Eventually you will hit that bullseye.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in a real, true prophecy. Number 2 would be that some kind of act would occur which would defy every single known law of physics, and defy it in like a significant way, not in a way in which we're like, this is an interesting principle of the atom. No, I mean like essentially someone who could walk through walls who could make a mountain blow up with his mind, something that is truly remarkable and defies the laws of physics as we know it. Mm-hmm. And the third one would be a genuine medical miracle, like somebody regrowing an arm, something that really couldn't happen on its own, because some people would be like, he can see again. Well, there are examples where that actually can happen, but I'm just talking about, like, a guy being able to survive when he's been decapitated and all he is a head. Like a genuine, like, what the hell is going on kind of miracle. These may not convince me that there is, say, a Judeo-Christian God, but it might convince me that there is some evidence that something supernatural that you can't explain is happening.
You kind of sound like you're backing off from your original thing, that these are the things that...
No, but I would. Okay, my question to him wasn't to say wasn't to say what would make you lose absolute faith.
Yeah.
To be fair, what I said was what would convince you that perhaps you are making this up in your own mind. I think the answer that we'd find from this young man is the fact that there is no such example. That it is impossible to do so. That it would be so earth-shatteringly insane for him to do that, because his entire foundation of his life is based on this. But the entire foundation of my life is not based on my atheism. Atheism just happens to be a particular stance that I view regarding the way the universe operates. That's all. It doesn't give me my morality. It doesn't give me anything. I get that from other sources. But all of his morality, his existence, everything is so focused on this religion. It essentially creates his schema, his worldview, that to shatter that would be completely and utterly disastrous to him. And so it would be very dangerous for him. Where would he go from there? It would not be advisable for him.
Well, he's already associated Christianity with his moral compass.
Exactly.
So if you take away Christianity, you take away his moral compass. You do something like that, that's a pretty terrifying experience.
That's a mind job.
It really is.
So in his own interest, if you can imagine, like, pretend the personality is a selfish entity that wants to maintain itself, right?
Yeah.
Just for a moment. Well, that personality would see that anything that could potentially object to its own existence is a threat. Mm-hmm. As such, it will either ignore it or it will invent some kind of way to just basically dismiss it easily, because it doesn't want to consider these things. It is at risk of losing its stranglehold on him, and that particular personality is set in this Judeo-Christian worldview. So he doesn't have a lot of chances of ever being convinced, unfortunately. Well, there are still many chances.
Unfortunately for you. Fortunately for him.
Unfortunately for... Yeah. Well, I guess it depends how you see it. Maybe he's perfectly happy.
I mean, he's got a... I bet you anything he met his hot wife at church.
There's a lot of really attractive girls at one of those church camps. It makes it kind of like, I could fake it. Not for 30 years. I don't think I could fake it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the second topic that I wanted to talk about. This is actually an article that appeared on my site.
It was a very popular article.
It was another article that was promoted, and a lot of people started talking about it. It was actually about this group in Atlanta that believes that staring at the sun between 5 to 45 minutes a day can make them lose weight and feel great, energized, healthier, younger, you name it.
My question when I first heard about this is, how are these people not blind?
Well, actually, because their guru, Mr. Hira Ratan Manik, a retired Indian spice trader,
exotic.
Already, I like you.
Yeah.
Now he tells them that there are specific times during the day they should be looking at the sun. Sunsets, sunrise.
Yeah.
Now, there's a particular reason why most of us can view a beautiful sunset without necessarily burning our eyes out, and that has to do with the same reason why the sun is actually a different color when it rises and when it sets. It goes through much, much more atmosphere, right? Mm-hmm. The light takes longer for it to reach us, therefore it's closer to the red end of the spectrum. Meanwhile, when it's like really high above, it's closer to kind of like, a yellow or a white kind of thing, right? Basically, that if it's the lower it is, the less intensity that sun has. I mean, how many people suntan during sunset? I don't know many people. Yeah. And really, during those particular times, it may not be that particularly harmful. But you have to remember, though, these people are looking at it for up to 45 minutes a day. Even though it may not be harmful to look at it for just a few minutes while the sun goes down, you have to admit 45 minutes to just look at an object which can, in the long term, damage those eyes is pretty damn dangerous.
Definitely. It's
definitely irresponsible. And what's surprising here is that this guy is a breatharian. Are you familiar with
So he is a breatharian.
He is a breatharian.
He's a breatharian and a sunarian?
I guess he decided that to release his own DVD of of advice and goodies.
Does he have a DVD?
Oh, he has a DVD. It's about $29 or something like that. It's pretty damn expensive. It's the only swag he has so far. Although I'm sure he'll have special goggles or special sandals you have to wear.
Yeah.
Shit, I don't want to give
Or
him
a
any
shirt that says-
ideas.
Or his shirt that said, "I stared at the sun for 45 minutes and all I got was blind."
All I got was a big spot in my eye. Well, most people who read it were actually pretty amused by it, or bemused by it. They thought it was actually kind of funny. But my whole thing, the reason I wrote it isn't just because I think it's funny. I think that it's frustrating. I'm angry at these kinds of scam artists.
Yeah.
That can so easily convince just a bunch of desperate people that the sun is so full of radiant energies that somehow they're going to penetrate through your eye and they're going to revitalize your soul.
Yeah.
I mean, I get tired of this new age crap.
Well, what's funny, that I find this is up there with The Secret. We talked about The Secret in the last episode, and I found that really stupid. And I find this one, I find it I find it just as dumb as The Secret. The Secret to me is no less dumb than this one.
I mean, you have to wonder at one point, like, why is it so easy to convince someone of just for
To give credit to the human race, though, there's I'm sure not that many. Like, do they have the numbers? Do they have the numbers?
They're only like maybe 100 or something. They're small.
I mean,
but look at them as a whole, like the whole New Age movement. Okay, of which my sister is part of which your mom is part of.
Yeah,
I mean,
she
all
buys.
know.
My mom buys the swag. She buys
the New Age swag.
I think she's got The Secret.
I definitely think she has it.
I'm tempted to watch it with her. Like when a dog pees on the carpet, you're supposed to stick its face in the pee.
You're not going to do that with your mom, are you?
You're gonna be like,
you bastard.
Well, I feel bad for using an analogy where my mom is a dog.
Or are you just saying that you're going to watch it and you're going to just basically point at every flaw when it's not true? But you're not an expert, say, in quantum mechanics. Or,
I don't have to be. I just look at it and go, duh.
Oh, that's your tactic.
Exactly.
To kind of shame her.
Oh, yeah, basically.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's why I use the dog analogy, because the whole idea is to shame the dog. So in this case, I would shame my mom in front of everybody else. But I'm sure my dad already,
He's a quiet fellow. I don't think he'd say anything. Although it was funny that your father was reading a book by Michael Shermer called Why We Believe Weird Things, which explains exactly why people believe the garbage. So perhaps he has a plan in mind. Perhaps he plans on having a conversation with your mother about the ridiculousness of
my
New
dad
Age.
and my mom have an understanding, and this is the understanding that most people have, which is basically there's no point in debating this kind of stuff because you're not going to convince people. And just wrapping back quickly to this situation with this Tony guy, is that I believe he came and he discussed with you these items from a point of almost seeming neutral to get you into it and to get you debating it. And I think it was actually a kind of, because he knew if he came out and he was like, this is who I am and this is my site and this is everything else, he didn't hide it, but he didn't flaunt it. And honestly, I think lots of people come out and they debate things from a position of not seeming to be too hardcore, and it hides the fact that of their true position, because it changes the debate when you realize that a person is, say, hardcore or whatever like that. It does.
Well, it changes your tactics inside the debate. Yeah. Because then you might be like, okay, well, I'm going to have to lay out the big guns, and maybe he wanted to have a bit of a lighter discussion.
It's like when you're having a chess match with somebody, and they're crazy hardcore. You don't try and pull out that 4-move checkmate.
Maybe not. But I would also say, for instance, maybe for him, he surrounded himself with people that share his worldview so much. He might genuinely be curious to know, what is an atheist like? I mean, he's from Puerto Rico, and there are probably not many atheists over there. If they are, they probably don't make themselves very
South Americans
available. Are very... Puerto Rico is actually an American colony.
No, I was about to say South American and in generally...
Latin American.
Latin American, there we go. Latin American, because I've dated several Latin American people, and they're very casually religious. They don't even think of it as anything special that, like this guy, they would have a website devoted to their religious thoughts and, just basically their declaration of religious feelings.
Religious intent.
Yes, exactly.
But back to the sun thing, what I wanted to mention is the fact that there's this one glaring part, and I know this is kind of a weird thing to focus on, but I just thought I'd just mention it for a second, where He claims in his article, because this is one of the main points that he likes to discuss, and this is something that almost every New Ager says, that we use between 5 to 7% of our brains. He even goes to assert that Albert Einstein used about 32% of his brain. And there was actually, I think, 1 or 2 people on it that were like, no, he's right, we use 5 to 7% of our brains. Or I guess the common number is probably 10 by now.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus. I've heard it before, and it makes sense. Heard those stories about if you use 20%, you can like scan people's heads and start fires with your mind.
Well, the reason why that's a popular belief, and essentially was just created as
cool.
It was just created as a news story. It was just some journalist wanted to say something scientifically sounding, so he just pulled out those numbers. But really, I mean, if you want to look at it from, I guess, its roots, I mean, when you're doing scans of the brains, you're going to look for what areas light up during different times, right? If I'm thinking math, different parts of my brain might light up, right? Yeah. Now, if I'm thinking about only math, then those parts will light up, almost exclusively.
Yeah.
If you looked at a scan, you might be like, well, it seems that only 10% of these dots seem to be lit up. Mm-hmm. Well, that's because there's certain parts of your brains that are really specialized. Noam Chomsky calls them organs of the brains, and that's how we started to see the brain as organs, different parts having different functions, and not every function is going to be active at any particular time because you're not using every part of your brain. When you're being creative, you might not necessarily be very analytical. When you're engaging in sex, maybe you're not doing your taxes. You know what I mean? Maybe you do. I don't know. You got ADD. I don't know how you focus.
I've tried it, and let's just say I got audited right the next year.
How much do you make a year? Oh God.
I made 20.
But the reason why it's so popular is because this is a classic gimmick that New Agers use to make you believe that you are not tapping into your potential. And everyone wants to believe that they're not tapping into all of their potential, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, I got so much to offer. I'm so special. Be like, all I got to do is if I use more of my brain, I can be super smart and super powerful. And the honest truth is that we are limited by the device that we have in our head. It is a toolbox, but for some, it's a little bit sharper than others, and some are really dulled out. Mm-hmm. And if it's really dulled out, you probably want to wish that it's not. And anybody coming over and saying, you know what? You might be a little bit smarter than you think. You're only using 5% of it. And if someone's really stupid, be like, I might be able to be smart like Albert Einstein if I use 32. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to happen.
And you can just get that by staring at the sun, he's saying? You open up your...
Well, he says that the brain is powered by the sun, which goes through the eyes. This is where he gets this fact. I mean, I'd love to figure it out. I guess he sees like a ray of light as being full of energy. So he must think, well, it goes in the eye, and behind the eye is the brain. I guess it'd be the brain stem, pretty close to the medulla oblongata. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I guess he figures it just goes right through, and all that good energy comes up in that brain. But I mean, it's powered by sugar, man.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what it's powered by, and the sun doesn't provide you a lot of sugar.
Unfortunately. Delicious sugar.
Oh, man. I'd be outside with my mouth open all day. Give me some sugar. That'd be a messed up world. We'd all be drug addicts on sugar.
Yes, we would all be drug addicts if it was like that.
Uh-oh. Did you want to have it coming out? Last time we talked about our level of education. Did you want to talk about the drugs that you've done?
My mom might listen to this.
She's not going to listen to this.
Let me tell you what. I've never done drugs ever.
Ah, okay, good to know. Is there any other confessions that you'd like to make?
No.
Wow, you have to think that for a while. Okay, and with that, we'll end the show. So again, I'd like to encourage everyone, if they can, go visit the site. Again, that's www.thegoodatheist.net. I am your host, Jacob Forte.
And I am your co-guest person that is temporarily here for now. because
You're fired.
because I speak good for this radio thing.
You're fired.
I guess I won't see you next week.
You have to say your name, dummy.
Oh, I'm Ryan Harkness.
Have a good atheist day.